Heartless. These denizens of the Dark Realm are the most common foe in the Kingdom Hearts series, and Sora and his companions gleefully massacre them by the dozen. But it's about time we take a break from the slaughter and stop and smell the roses. There are over 500 different Heartless across all of the games, and each and every one of them deserves a moment in the spotlight. Of course, certain enemies merit a lot more than just some charitable oohs and ahs, so today we'll be ranking every Heartless, yes, every Heartless, to determine which are worthy warriors of the Realm of Darkness, and which are better left at the blunt end of a Keyblade. There's a lot that goes into a good Heartless. Visual design, gameplay, theming, story significance, and just general vibes. There's no one method to determine an exact rank for every Heartless, so at the end of the day this list will be subjective. But I'll do my best to showcase the good and bad of every Heartless, and if you have any complaints, you can choose to either leave a comment or make your own multi-hour video series about it. Given that there are over 500 soldiers in the Heartless army, it's important to stand out from the crowd. One of the worst things a Heartless can do is nothing. Even just having one unique attack, memorable design element, or just a funny name, anything really that stops the Heartless from blending in with the rest of the troops, will go a long way. The ranking exercise is largely an excuse to showcase the extraordinary breadth of Heartless designs across the series. My first objective in this video is to teach you the ins and outs of the Heartless forces, so as we go through each Heartless, I'll be showing a summary of their essential information. This will include which games they appeared in, represented by these logos. I'll also show all of the renders from the different games, including the final mix recolors. My second objective in this video, and the reason you're here, is to put every Heartless onto a tier list. The rankings are made up of 7 tiers split into 13 parts, in true Kingdom Hearts fashion. The two halves of S tier are for the best of the best. I've decided to name this tier after one of the most perfect and satisfying things I can think of in the Kingdom Hearts series: the gong and the Lord of the Castle part of the 13th anthology. Just as you can feel the impact of that beautiful gong, the Heartless in this tier are perfect additions that have left a mark on the Kingdom Hearts series. The A tier is home to Heartless that go above and beyond and really do something unique with their design and gameplay. The top division is for Heartless that are just one step away from being truly extraordinary. The middle division is for model Heartless, those with an interesting and incredibly inspired design. The bottom division is for Heartless that are unique and interesting, but have some little things holding them back. I'm dubbing the B tier the whole pint tier. I consider any Heartless in this tier a success, and a worthy addition to the Heartless forces. The ones in the top half just try a little harder than the others. Naturally, the C tier that follows is for the half pints. I have a neutral to mildly positive impression of these Heartless. They're not breaking any boundaries, I wouldn't jump at the opportunity to include them in future games, but they get the job done. I'd consider this the cutoff for good Heartless. Heartless at the top end of this tier have a hint of something interesting, and those at the bottom are inoffensive but unnoteworthy. The D tier is named after the passive-aggressive game over message from Kingdom Hearts Magical Puzzle Clash: try harder next time. These Heartless are truly the bottom of the barrel spider. Enemies in this tier bring absolutely nothing to the table and don't need to exist. I got 3 words for you: bad Heartless. The F tier is the land of the awful but memorable, much like Phil's inability to perform basic mathematical operations. They might have putrid boss fights, annoying gimmicks, or terrible designs, but more often than not they have some faint redeeming quality to them. Maybe it's a cool design element or notable story role, but something's holding these Heartless back from being the true worst of the worst. So I'm gonna pull an organization move and add an extra 14th tier for Heartless that are actively negative. Ones for which the capital W world would be a better place without their presence. A cereal bowl would make a better Heartless. One quick note, as of the making of this video, Kingdom Hearts Missing Link is still in development. I won't be including any new Missing Link Heartless, partly to prevent spoilers, and partly to avoid ranking a Heartless before we know its full agenda. Depending on how long the series takes, I might cover all the Missing Link enemies in a bonus video at the end. Anyway, let's take a trip back to the year 2002, and get started with the progenitors of Heartless kind.
Heartless? Is that what they're called?
Up first is the face of the Heartless army, the poster child for the forces of darkness, the Shadow. While you might think the Heartless equivalent of a Goomba would rank pretty average on the tier list, the Shadow has quite the impressive resume. It's the first Heartless you see in the entire series, the Heartless that appears in the most games, the Heartless that appears in the most different worlds, and one of the most story-significant Heartless, maintaining its relevance throughout 20 years of Kingdom Hearts games. Wherever there's a Heartless, there's bound to be a Shadow, and that kind of reputation isn't to be ignored. We have iconic moments such as the invincible shadows on Destiny Islands, the Shadow Army in the World That Never Was, and the parting of the Great Shadow Sea in the Keyblade Graveyard. But also some underappreciated Shadow workmanship, like in Kingdom Hearts Recoded, with the incredibly satisfying horde on the 11th floor of the final system sector, or in Kingdom Hearts VCast, with the developer roadblock shadows that take 2 hours to defeat. While it won't take more than a few Keyblade swings or even a brisk run to knock down a Shadow in the games, it will take quite a lot to knock the Shadow out of the top tier. The rest of the Shadow family is up next, but before we get on to our second Heartless, I want to give a quick mention to the Purple Shadow. These are exclusively spawned by the Dark Follower in Mission 43 of Days. They don't have their own name or journal entry, so they don't qualify as a separate Heartless, but I appreciate their existence nonetheless. The first of the Shadow's many cousins is the Gigas Shadow. Design-wise, it's exactly what's on the tin, a giant shadow. And while the Gigas Shadow lacks the story impact of its average-sized relative, it makes up for it in gameplay. Most of the rare Heartless in Kingdom Hearts Final Mix do something to shake up the normal flow of combat. In this case, the Gigas Shadows have rare synthesis drops, but they will vanish after landing a single hit, forcing you to take them down without making any mistakes. The Gigas Shadow also has the distinction of appearing in the most different Melody of Memory music stages, beating out the Shadow's 76 with a total of 78 appearances. All things considered, the Gigas Shadow is a solid Heartless with a decent amount to its name, so it's going pretty high on the list. The Mega Shadow is the awkward middle child of the main Shadow trio. Its size isn't intimidating like the Gigas Shadow, it doesn't have any noteworthy appearances like the ordinary Shadow, and the gameplay side of things doesn't do anything to make the Mega Shadow stand out. That said, if you're gonna copy someone's homework, the Shadow's a pretty good pick. The family name is doing the heavy lifting here, but I'm gonna place the Mega Shadow decently above average. Moving down the family tree, we have the Gift Shadow. The first of many Shadow variants introduced in Kingdom Hearts Key, the Gift Shadow is simply a Shadow wearing a present costume and a party hat, and honestly, I have to respect the confidence. The gimmick of this Heartless is that it drops a lot of prizes, harkening back to the bulky vendor from KH2, and it most commonly appeared during holiday and celebration events. Having a Heartless that you actively want to encounter is enough to make it stand out from the crowd, but not enough to save it from the lowest spot on the tier list so far. The Flower Rider is next on the list. While a Shadow riding a flower isn't the most creative idea for a Heartless, it's charming enough, and it works really well with the flower imagery in Dwarfwood Lands and Wonderland. I like it when a Heartless makes an effort to fit in with the theming of a world, so the Flower Rider can slide in right next to the Gift Shadow in B tier. But theming isn't everything, and our friend the Flappy Rider is a perfect example of that. This Heartless is exclusive to Cybug Sector, and it does fit in really well, but the problem is it doesn't feel like its own Heartless. The Flappy Rider feels as though a Shadow just found a hoverbike and helmet lying around. There's so much potential for futuristic Cybug Sector Heartless designs, and the only exclusive design is squandered on this Shadow reskin. But I'm not ranking it for what it isn't, but for what it is, and what the Flappy Rider is ultimately pretty forgettable. Keeping with the Riders, we have the Shadow Witch and Shadow Magician. Despite being relatives of the Shadow, these are emblem Heartless, or at least the brooms are. The Shadow Witch is really evocative of its homeworld of Enchanted Dominion, so it's going pretty high. The Shadow Magician is going to fall several tiers lower. It's too over-designed for my liking. There's so much going on here that the charm and theming of its simpler sibling is all but lost. The Lion Dancer is one of the rarer Shadow variants, appearing almost exclusively in New Year's celebration quests. It's just a Shadow in a hat. But hey, a Heartless based on a traditional New Year's festival dance is an interesting concept, so I'll give it one tier higher than the baseline. Up next is a masterclass in theming, the Candy Apple, as well as its more dangerous sibling, the Poison Apple. Few Heartless fit in so naturally with their Disney world as the Apple twins do in Dwarfwood Lands. Their design is a direct callback to the poisoned apples from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and it works perfectly. It's still just another Shadow in a hat, but if you're going to edit an existing sprite to create a new Heartless on the cheap, this is how you do it. If only all of the Union Cross Heartless were as inspired as this duo. The last of the main Shadow family, it's the Rodeo Rider, one of the most special Heartless in the series. If you don't recognize it, I don't blame you. This is one of 3 Heartless to never appear outside of Japan. The Rodeo Rider was exclusive to limited-time New Year's missions in Kingdom Hearts Key starting in 2014, and was excluded from Union Cross entirely. Its design isn't winning any awards, but the flowers are cute, and its elusiveness certainly makes it stand out from the crowd, so it can get an ambitious spot in B tier. Moving on from the quintessential pureblood foot soldier to the quintessential pureblood commander, it's the Darkside. This thing is iconic. It's the first boss in the entire series, and it sure won't let you forget that. Across all games, you have to fight the Darkside a minimum of 13 times in just the main story alone. Its design captures the essence of a disturbing otherworldly shadow demon, and the fight itself is a great introduction to the Heartless army. But sadly, the Darkside hasn't evolved much since 2002. Its moveset in Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind is the same as it was back on the Storm-Tossed Island. There are some interesting shakeups here and there, such as shockwaves and days and some block shenanigans in Recoded, but the Darkside has gone from an intimidating monster to a giant sandbag, now in 2 new flavors. The exception to this trend is 0.2, which, between the Great Gauntlet of Darksides in the Rocky Path and the new moveset for the final Darkside in the Forest of Thorns, brings in enough new ideas to keep the Darkside from sliding out of top tier. The Darkside's first relative, the Dark Follower, differs from the original in that it is purple. And hey, those purple shadows from earlier are pretty neat, and seeing a member of the Darkside family in an interior space is pretty unique. Early trailers for Days had the ordinary Darkside in Beast's Castle instead of the Dark Follower, and I can't really say the new shade helps differentiate this Heartless from the original in any meaningful way. At the end of the day, though, even a replacement level Darkside is great Heartless design, so it goes to the bottom of A tier. The Darkside Omega is next, and oh boy, don't get me started on the Omega Heartless. A lot of the raid bosses in Kingdom Hearts Union Cross had these Omega variants, which have beefed up stats and a new coat of paint. The Darkside's new coat of paint is rather unremarkable. After over a decade of facing these Heartless, it's going to take a lot more than nail polish and frosted tips to make an impression. Combined with how the mobile art style brings the intimidation factor to an all-time low, the Darkside Omega is easily the worst of its family line. Moving back to the Heartless foot soldiers, we have the aptly named Soldier. This Heartless appears in almost every game, and its whole purpose is to be generic. The Soldier gets the job done, but you get the impression that its position in the Heartless army is just its 9 to 5, and it's never going to do anything more than exactly what's asked of it. It hasn't learned any new moves in the last 24 years, but it's a staple of the Heartless forces nonetheless. This is also the first instance of the Final Mix games recoloring the Heartless, and I'm glad they learned how to use the sepia filter. Unlike its ordinary sibling, the Final Mix exclusive Stealth Soldier applies itself, and I really wish it didn't. As its name implies, the Stealth Soldier has mastered the art of hiding, being completely invisible until you deal enough damage. The concept of an invisible Heartless that you need to hunt down to get a rare drop is a great idea, and the Stealth Soldier isn't a pushover either. But getting this thing to spawn is asinine, even with Encounter Plus increasing the appearance rate. That RNG nightmare knocks down the Stealth Soldier several tiers. Days introduced 3 new soldiers into the fray: the Sergeant, Commander, and Deserter. The Sergeant is basically just the Final Mix soldier with yellow nail polish, and it really has no reason to be here. It's one of the most nothing Heartless in the game. The Commander fares only slightly better. It's exclusive to Mission 57 and acts as the boss of the mission, which is enough of a shakeup to keep it from sharing the Sergeant's fate, if only barely. The Deserter is another story. By abandoning the Heartless hierarchy, it saved itself from its siblings' mediocrity. The Deserter only appears in groups, and it runs around at high speeds and doesn't attack. Once you land a hit, all of the Deserters come to avenge their fallen comrade, and it's always a pleasure to see any form of cooperation between Heartless. Plus, there are few things funnier than a group of Deserters pummeling Roxas. And also, it's a sweet irony that the first day Xion speaks to Roxas is the same day their mission is to eliminate the Deserters. All said, the Deserter is the best of the soldier family, no contest. But it looks like no one told Square Enix that the soldier bloodline had peaked, since we have 3 more siblings to cover. First up is the Pumpkin Soldier, and look, what do you want me to say about it? It's a Heartless made for Halloween events. If this thing appeared in Halloween Town, it'd be a different story, but as it stands, it's not much better than average. The Diver is better, since its design fits in with the aquatic portions of Daybreak Town, but it's certainly not winning awards for creativity, and it's not like there's any interesting gameplay to speak of. San Francisco's High Soldier is the biggest disappointment of the bunch, since you'd think they'd realize that an uninspired soldier reskin with 0 new attacks isn't really going to cut it 11 games in. Even the journal entries can't think of anything interesting to say about this waste of a Heartless. Now, the Air Soldier isn't actually part of the Soldier family, they're just pals. The ordinary Air Soldier isn't much more interesting than the standard Soldier, with only a few very basic aerial attacks to call its own. Kingdom Hearts 3 changes things though, with a new version of the Air Soldier themed around Olympus. While I'm not huge on the redesign, it has an interesting bit of synergy with the Bizarre Archers, being able to carry them around for aerial snipes. This version of the Air Soldier is also set to return in Missing Link for what it's worth. It gets a pass from me.
The only Heartless left anywhere are the local variety.
Why don't we take a break from the large families of Heartless and turn our attention to some of the one-off KH1 enemies? Most of the early game Heartless have a lot of variants, so we'll have to jump to some of the later Disney worlds in order to find someone like the White Knight. This creepy Heartless is right at home in Halloween Town, and in Union Cross it's associated with the dark dunes of Agrabah. The White Knight is known for moving in strange ways and having a funky spin attack. It's solid and memorable, even if the final mix recolor is just another sepia filter. B tier. The White Knight's partner in crime is the Gargoyle, and to be honest, it doesn't really do much for me. It's just a spookier version of the Air Soldier with equally basic attacks and mildly annoying teleportation abilities. The Gargoyle gets a moment to shine in the Oogie Boogie boss fight, and if you squint, you could say the Gargoyle appears in the Premonition key art, but that's not enough to cure its mid-tier status. The Gargoyle's only relative is the Margoyle. The Margoyle wasn't introduced until near the end of Union Cross's lifespan, but I'll be jiggered, it has a lot going for it. The visual element blows the ordinary Gargoyle out of the water, and it's a fearsome opponent in both Union Cross and Dark Road, insofar as you can consider any enemy in those games fearsome. That's enough to elevate it to the bottom of B tier. The last of the Halloween Town natives is the Chimera, and it really has all you could ask for in a Heartless. The design excels at capturing the essence of the world. It is a creepy and confusing hodgepodge of natural and artificial parts, which feels right at home with Dr. Finkelstein's experiments. The gameplay provides a reasonable challenge. The Chimera has multiple distinct phases, and it interacts with other Heartless by means of summoning gargoyles. Even the context of the Heartless is noteworthy, since it has an interesting history outside of the game. Although the Chimera is exclusive to Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, its origins can be traced back to some of the earliest Kingdom Hearts concept art. The only real drawback is the annoyance of getting it to spawn, but even the fact that you have to go back to the site of a previous boss battle to encounter the Chimera is an interesting feature, and its sudden entrance is another boost to its case. It's going to be the first Emblem Heartless inducted into the S tier. Well done. On to Atlantica, and we'll start our trip with the Shadow of the Sea Neon. This is another case where fitting in with the world isn't enough to impress or stand out from the crowd. Also, that is just a jellyfish. The most interesting thing I can say about the gameplay is that the Sea Neon drops MP orbs when they die, which is going to be after just 1 or 2 hits. I have even less to say about their Chain of Memories appearance, since the underwater combat was the only thing making the Neon not completely forgettable. I do appreciate Melody of Memory bringing them and the Sheltering Zone back for just the 2 Atlantica music stages, though. Speaking of, the Sheltering Zone is next on the list. This Heartless is just a larger Sea Neon, but they have the unique trait of splitting into 3 Sea Neons when defeated by something other than magic or a critical hit. Any Heartless that forces the player to change their strategy and approach combat from a new angle is winning points with me, even if the design certainly isn't. Joining the Sheltering Zone in just over par is the Screwdiver. By itself, it's just an aquatic soldier, and we already have one of those, but the Screwdiver gets carried by the Heartless it carries, the Aqua Tank. The Aqua Tank is one of the only enemies to spawn alongside another Heartless species, since it will always appear along with 3 Screwdivers, unless there are too many enemies loaded in. The Aqua Tank attacks with a big blast of thunder, which heals the Screwdivers. So not only is this a rare case of Heartless symbiosis, it's taking advantage of the natural elemental resistances, since Sora's thunder spells can also be absorbed by the Screwdriver. However, I can't say I noticed any of this when playing KH1, since these Heartless all fall down too quickly for the interesting features to have any time to shine. Still, the Aqua Tank earns its spot as a modest whole pint, and since the Screwdriver is only interesting when its big brother is around, it's gonna fall a few tiers lower. I think I've been spreading too much positivity, so let's introduce the first resident of the bottom tier, the Jet Balloon. I wanna like the Jet Balloon, I really do, but it doesn't make it easy. Its only move is running away while firing missile divers, but this simple technique belies the full scope of the Jet Balloon's wickedness. Chasing after the Heartless to cast Stop isn't a particularly fun task, and getting hit by a single missile diver will make Sora drop a large amount of money. The obvious solution is to cast Daroga, which makes Sora completely immune to the missile divers, thus turning this frustrating encounter into a mind-numbingly dull one. But the thing that pushes the Jet Balloon from unfortunate to unforgivable is the room where you fight it. I sure hope you landed the finishing blow while the Jet Balloon was above deck, otherwise your dazzling stones are going right to Davy Jones. The same goes for any money Sora drops. Overall, there's little merit to the Jet Balloon encounter, save for the amusing visual of launching a barrage of Heartless as living projectiles. I'll cut the missile divers some slack for being used as bullets, but they're still complicit in the Jet Balloon's behavior, and also thieves. Now that we've arrived in Neverland, let's take a look at the pirate. It's not breaking any new ground, but someone has to be the generic Neverland mook, and the pirate plays that role faithfully. Sword goes swoosh. Despite what the name implies, the air pirate is unrelated to the pirate, though it too sticks to Neverland when it can. I don't think it's as memorable as its terrestrial co-worker, and nothing about its design really feels like a pirate, so it falls in low C tier. We can't forget the aerial Viking. Well, actually, we can forget it, and I did up until writing the script. It's the first of many Cavern of Remembrance reskins from Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, and it really has no business being here. Maybe next time, try copying the moveset of a less mediocre Heartless. Next in Neverland, the Battleship. I won't bury the lead on this one. The Battleship is going straight to the top. Few Heartless have such intricacy and care put into their moveset. In addition to the main battleship, the Heartless has 3 targetable components, being the stern, cannons, and mast. You can just kill the battleship outright, but destroying the components will remove some of the battleship's dangerous attacks, and even give their own unique set of drops. The battleship also cooperates with other Heartless, firing a cure bullet at any injured allies, which Sora can intercept to heal himself. In addition, the battleship serves a role in the Captain Hook boss fight, running interference and preventing Sora from camping Hook out with the autoglide ability, since it's one of the few Heartless designed for air-to-air combat. Once you get Gravigo later in the game, you can destroy all of its components in one hit, and it's incredibly satisfying. All in all, the battleship is just a well-designed and challenging foe. What a good Heartless. Speaking of good Heartless, it's the Phantom, Scourge of the Neverland Clock Tower. The hands of the clock will turn as you fight the Heartless, and once they reach 12, the targeted party member will vanish. The Phantom won't just knock them out, their UI will be deleted from the screen and they will not be able to be revived. Casting Stop on the hands of the clock is the only way to stop the Phantom's death sentence technique, but even then it only delays the inevitable. This is such a cool gimmick, and it fits so perfectly with the environment. I don't think anyone came into Kingdom Hearts expecting a boss fight where Big Ben counts down to your death. Sadly, the rest of the fight is kind of dull. The Phantom only has 2 moves, both of which are quite simple and easily avoided. It is only susceptible to one type of damage at a time, indicated by the orb beneath its robes. Red for fire, blue for blizzard, yellow for thunder, and white for physical attacks. While cool in concept, this makes killing the Phantom a bit of a chore, since most of the time you're just floating there waiting for the orb to appear. Still, this sinister Heartless is an easy pick for the S tier. Our last stop on this KH1 World Tour is the Parasite Cage, the only Monstro-exclusive Heartless in base KH. As far as bosses go, the Parasite Cage isn't making any waves, except maybe the pool of stomach acid. The main attraction of the first Parasite Cage battle is that you get to fight alongside Riku, but the second fight and the rematches in Chain of Memories only have a life-leeching floor to call their own. Although I love the idea of a Heartless that acts as a living prison and captures your allies, the execution leaves much to be desired, and I've always found the Parasite Cage battles to be among the more mindless and annoying fights in KH1 and COM. A solid effort, but not extraordinary by any means.
The Heartless.
Alright, now that we've exhausted the late game Disney worlds, let's go back to some more KH1 mainstays, starting with the Large Body. The Large Body is one of the most recurring enemies in the series, and despite its relative simplicity, it's among the most memorable of the common Heartless. As you probably know, the Large Body deflects any physical attacks from the front, forcing you to use magic or strike it from behind. A simple gimmick, but an effective one, and the Large Body required at least some strategy to take down all the way up until KH3, where the abundance of form changes and other armor-penetrating moves renders the Large Body largely ignorable. I did want to point out the creature's wrist cuffs though. I never really noticed them before, but it makes it seem like the Large Body was some kind of prisoner that broke free from its shackles by tearing them in half. Neat. The classic counterpart to the Large Body is the Fat Bandit. Its main distinguishing feature is the ability to spit fire, but even as early as 2002, this Heartless felt a bit lazy. It gets points for the Agrabah theming, but not much else. Days introduced an entire subfamily of large body Heartless, the Armors, also native to Agrabah. These Heartless share the frontal immunity of the large body and take it one step further, being invincible to all attacks that don't target their head. Hitting this weak point will knock the armor down, allowing you to deal large chunks of damage with fire, arrow, or blizzard spells. It's an interesting shakeup, but it's more annoying than it is engaging. This leaves the basic large armor as a distinctly average Heartless. The clay armor is unique to Mission 39, but nothing is unique about the clay armor, so this sunburnt palette swap will be left to wander the bottom tier, looking for a reason to exist. The solid armor is more of the same, except its angry punch and hip drop techniques inflict the silent status, preventing Roxas from casting spells. It doesn't make it any more interesting to take down, but at least means that you have to take a bit more care when mashing A, so the solid armor can slide in next to the large armor. The final armor brother is the land armor. The land armor is exclusive to Mission 90. This is the mission where Roxas is sent to place the mysterious device in Agrabah's Cave of Wonders, and by this point he is fed up with the organization's nonsense. We are 3 missions from the end of the game, and in comes the land armor, the 4th color swap of this annoyingly fortified Heartless, the very last new Heartless to be introduced in Days. Maybe it's the gall of adding such a lazy enemy so late in the game, and maybe it's the fact that this Heartless forces Roxas to protect a device whose purpose he doesn't know on behalf of an organization who doesn't respect him, but the land armor stands out to me more than its armored brethren. It can squeak in right next to the Fat Bandit in the middle of the tier list. Back to the main large body bloodline, we have the Large Snowman. It has a pair of goofy elf shoes and a literal bucket hat, but its festive appearance can only get it so far in a game where the family's frontal invincibility gimmick doesn't really apply. Sorry. The Ringmaster is next, and it's in the same situation as the Snowman as far as gameplay is concerned. The design is certainly something. I'm entranced by its cute little Heartless staff, perplexed by its circus tent hat, and ensorcelled by its fashionable blonde mustache. Low B tier. We've encountered some pretty lazy Heartless designs so far, but the huge snowman takes the cake. It is literally just the large snowman, but larger. The huge snowman gets saved from the absolute bottom tier because A, that's hilarious, and B, it actually has some bearing on the story, being the focal point of a 15 quest arc in Beath's Castle. The next pair of large body descendants are both pretty good in my book, being the Ferocious Finns and the Shipwreck Shark. Both of these are native to the waters of Daybreak Town. I'll give the Shipwreck Shark an edge in the rankings, since it's fairly significant to players' beach side quest, but both are solid members of the family. I don't really know what the Icy Beast is supposed to be, but I'm a fan. However, while the Icy Beast got a fair amount of attention in Dark Road special events, it's otherwise not making much of an impact. I don't know about you, but when I hear Icy Beast and Kingdom Hearts, my mind goes to the cold manner in which the master of a certain castle rebuffs Zaldin's advances, not this frozen over bowling ball. It goes here. The last of the large bodies is the Helmed body, and much like the High Soldier, it's a large disappointment. Its moveset is identical to the large bodies, and while it generally has higher HP, strength, and defense than the original, the maximum post-game stats are actually the same for both Heartless, so the helmed body truly has nothing to call its own. Jiminy did his best to sway public opinion with a charming journal entry, but for me, the helmed body remains safely at the bottom of the pack. Power Wilds have been tossed around from world to world over the years. Starting off in Deep Jungle in KH1, they were relocated to Olympus Coliseum in Chain of Memories following The Incident. In Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, Power Wilds were reserved for late-game Agrabah, and KH3 let them inhabit the forests of Twilight Town in the Kingdom of Corona before giving them their own home in the Caribbean. And yeah, that Power Wild hideout in Isla Verde Montaña is doing a lot to raise their score. It's an optional explorable location that gives new life and a much-needed sanctuary to these refugee monkeys. Way to go, KH3. The Bouncy Wild did not survive the mass extinction brought about by the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate, but it made the most out of its time in the realm of light. While the Bouncy Wild's design is just the Final Mix Power Wild recolor on Estrogen, the moveset certainly stands out from the crowd. In addition to the basic slingshot attack, which is itself a good contrast to the melee-focused Power Wilds, the Bouncy Wild can drop banana peels. Slipping on one of these banana peels will cause 80 money to scatter around the battlefield. However, if you can trick a Bouncy Wild into slipping on their own banana peel, they'll drop 45 money and potentially some ethers, mega ethers, and power shards. This is even carried over into Kingdom Hearts Re-Chain of Memories, where slipping on a banana peel will scatter 500 or about 10% of your Moogle points. There aren't many Heartless that can hurt the player outside of dealing damage or status effects, so the money-stealing gimmick makes the Bouncy Wild stand out, especially in KH1 where the economy is much more limited. And because the Bouncy Wild only appears in a small few worlds, the gimmick doesn't get stale or annoying. Overall, a welcome addition to the Heartless crew. Next up is the Bouncy Wild's edgy sibling, the Sniper Wild. Like its sister, the Sniper Wild wields a slingshot, and if Sora gets spotted, it will call the entire squad to shoot unblockable pellets. Fortunately, the Sniper Wilds are short-sighted and lack peripheral vision, so evading their gaze isn't too difficult, at least at first. As you defeat more of them, the Sniper Wilds will move around faster and faster, but the rewards will also increase for each Heartless slain. I get the impression that this Heartless isn't particularly well liked by the general community, since until you understand the gimmick, it can be incredibly frustrating to deal with. But once you get a good idea of their spawn pattern and have access to abilities like Stopka, Ars Arcanum, and Super Glide, taking them down is incredibly satisfying. There aren't many other stealth-based challenges in the series, and certainly not any that play into the main combat abilities like the Sniper Wilds do, so these monkeys are going pretty high on my list. There are two more Power Wild siblings from the Key series, the first of which is the Cheery Ape. It was created for the Kingdom Hearts Key New Year's event in 2016, the final year before the browser game shut down. Similarly to the Lion Dancer, I respect the vision of the design, and while I consider the Cheery Ape to be far more transformative than the Lion Dancer, it is also the only Heartless to wear socks and sandals, so it's not going any higher than its New Year's predecessor. The Wild Shaman is the last of the family line, appearing in Enchanted Dominion in Kingdom Hearts Union Cross. The green orbs of magic and fabulous pink nails are a nice nod to Maleficent, and I find the leaf hat oddly charming, so the Wild Shaman can sit next to the original Power Wild as a certified whole pint. Our next stop is Agrabah to take a look at the Bandit family. The Bandit is to Agrabah what the Pirate is to Neverland. A solid Heartless for the world, but nothing to write home about. I guess there's that one scene in KH2 where Sora has a flashback to something that never actually happened, where Jafar is commanding a bunch of bandits and lasts for a needlessly long amount of time, but that's not going to help much. I have some respect for the Bandit for being the most unique out of the ordinary Heartless in Kingdom Hearts V cast, what with spawning in from actual room entrances instead of arbitrary combat zones, but that can't lift the Bandit out of its destined mediocrity. What if the Final Mix recolor of the Bandit was its own Heartless? Meet the Red Bandit. It has a cooler sword and a new pair of shoes, but otherwise it's just a bandit with a favorite color. It's not like the red moniker indicates the presence of fire-based attacks, what it actually does is buff and heal its allies, so I don't see much of a reason to put the Red Bandit any higher than I have to. The swordsman chooses a more honorable profession than the rest of the bandit family. It is one of 4 Heartless created for the 2014 Boys' Day celebration event in Kingdom Hearts Key, and its design is apparently a reference to the Kintaro dolls associated with the holiday. As someone who is far from an expert on Japanese culture, I don't have much insightful commentary to offer, so I'll just slot the swordsman in C tier and move on to the last member of the clan. For those who played the mobile games, I'm sure the Wily Bandit needs no introduction, but for everyone else, this is the asshole who made us search for Abu in the desert for 560 story quests. Yes, I know not all of those quests were in Agrabah, but 124 of them were, and that's still an entire year of looking for that ungrateful monkey. But I can't place the Wily Bandit all the way at the bottom of the list. Its design isn't bad, at the very least far better than the Red Bandit, and it takes skill to become a despicable villain without uttering a single line of dialogue. This last enemy isn't actually a member of the Bandit family, but it's been a while since I mentioned any Kingdom Hearts 2 Heartless, so I thought I'd bring in the Bandit's successor, the Luna Bandit. Aside from occasionally popping out of street stalls, the Luna Bandit doesn't do much to shake off the allegations of being a replacement level bandit. The Search Ghost was always an odd Heartless. Its design is infused with that Halloween Town spirit, but it's also found in Monstro and Atlantica, with the mobile games adding Beast's Castle into the rotation. Its ability to heal itself by leeching the life of its enemies is fairly unique, but its propensity for teleportation is bothersome, and it goes down too quickly to have any real impact. The Search Ghost is also at the center of several of Dr. Finkelstein's experiments, making it one of the few Heartless we see in a comatose state. I guess it's worth noting that the Union Cross version of the Search Ghost has a different color scheme than the KH1 original, which is a rare occurrence, but in the end, the Search Ghost leaves me searching for a reason to place it higher than C tier. The Grand Ghost fares a lot better. Another one of the Kingdom Hearts Final Mix puzzle Heartless, the Grand Ghost will drop Frost Stones if you throw healing items at it, with better items like Elixirs and Mega Elixirs increasing the drop rate. Once you figure out the gimmick, the fight is completely meaningless. Selecting the Heartless as the target of the item can be a bit more frustrating than it needs to be, and if it moves last second, you might find yourself wasting an elixir or 2. However, because the Grand Ghost parts with Frost Stones 2 or 3 at a time, you're not going to need to farm it for materials the same way you would the Stealth Soldier or Sniper Wild. I might be placing this higher than I should, but it's too late to back down now. Okay, so, take a Search Ghost, make its teleportation more frequent and annoying, and make the grab animation as long as possible, and you have yourself the Hover Ghost. It's not too much of an obstacle given that it takes over 4 times damage from Fire and Blizzard and nearly 6 times damage from Arrow, but it's annoying, and it isn't anything more than an unneeded replacement for the Search Ghost. Okay, so, take a Hover Ghost, remove its elemental weaknesses, increase its HP 6-fold, make it a required kill, and you have yourself the Carrier Ghost. It only appears in Boneyard 2, a cramped room with not a lot of space to fight. Aerial combos will cause the Carrier Ghost to rise into the sky, forcing you to wait until it comes back down to your level. Spells are somewhat effective if you've packed a lot of magic panels, but regardless of the method, this fight takes altogether too long to finish. It might not be the most offensive Heartless on this list, but I will gladly give the Carrier Ghost a seat in the bottommost tier. The Living Pod goes in S tier. Does its design do anything to warrant such a lofty placement? No, not really, but this is my list, and the Living Pod is purely a passion pick. I love this thing. The Living Pod only shows up in Mission 80. On this day, Roxas has to break the jars in Beast's Castle, and it's such a wonderfully bizarre mission. Why are we spending our time breaking jars when we're 300 days into the game? An assessment of your luck. Okay, but how did the jars get here? I understand the first pottery smashing exercise in Mission 33, that was in the organization's own backyard. But did one of Roxas' superiors sneak into Beast's Castle to set up this training exercise? If so, they've got a cruel sense of humor hiding this one. And when we break one of 4 randomly selected jars, the Living Pod pops out. Is this also the doing of the organization? Did they purposely set up Roxas against this stupidly powerful Heartless just to keep him on his toes? The mission description makes it seem so, but whatever the case may be, the Living Pods make this mission stand out. You can try to kill them, but since they have so much health and the mission doesn't require it, you're better off ignoring them. But trying to smash all the pots while these powerhouses are chasing you can get quite hectic, and it's a fun shake-up to the monotony of Days missions. Also, if you do decide to take the safe route and kill the living pods one by one as they appear, you'll get absolutely no reward from killing them, suggesting that this hectic dodge and weave tactic is the intended strategy. Finally, a Heartless that brings some respect to the Search Ghost family name. Now, time for some Heartless that run that family name right back into the ground. There are 3 Search Ghost variants introduced in Union Cross: the Rush Ghost, Shred Ghost, and Trick Ghost. Like some other late-game Union Cross trios, each type of ghost is associated with a specific attribute, and they absorb attacks of metals of that type. Power for the Rush Ghost, speed for the Shred Ghost, and magic for the Trick Ghost. But this isn't a huge deal, so the main thing that's going to determine their rankings is their Halloween costume. The Shred Ghost holds its own, so it can rank by the basic Search Ghost. The Rush Ghost looks a bit dopey, so it goes 1 tier down. And while the Trick Ghost has the best outfit of the 3, it gets a special spot 1 tier lower for making me mad. Why is that? 500. Over 500 Heartless in the series, and the Trick Ghost is the only one to reuse a name. The Union Cross Trick Ghost managed to break one of the easiest rules of Heartless design, and for that special feat, it's being added to the naughty list.
The Heartless are completely out of control!
Time for another armor family, and these ones are all more solid Heartless than the solid armor was. The head of this family is the Guard Armor. In Kingdom Hearts and Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, each of its limbs have their own HP bar, and taking down the different components chips away at the Guard Armor's moveset. In Days, taking out their limbs makes their head vulnerable to attack, which is their true HP bar. In Recoded, the Guard Armor is the boss of the side-scrolling section. It isn't a paragon of enemy design in any of its appearances, but it's a good example of a unique idea that doesn't overstay its welcome. The Guard Armor's alter ego, the Opposite Armor, also doesn't overstay its welcome, but that's because it never had the chance. The fight doesn't provide much of a challenge, and it's likely going to be over before the Opposite Armor has a chance to fire its comically oversized energy cannon. The Hades Cup rematch is even more of a joke. While the gameplay leaves something to be desired, the idea of switching around the parts of a Heartless built around autonomous components is still an interesting angle. The Red Armor is a strange thing. In the original Kingdom Hearts, the armor that appeared in the Olympus Coliseum Cups was counted as a variant of the Guard Armor, but in Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, it was given the fitting title of Red Armor. Regardless of the name, it has nothing to distinguish it from the ordinary Guard Armor. I suppose its components can appear on their own in certain rounds, and there seems to be a visual bug where the shadow of destroyed components doesn't disappear when it should, but it's not enough to make me care. In terms of uniqueness, the Powered Armor is in the same boat as the Red Armor. It only appears in Mission 89, which is the boss rush in Twilight Town. But unlike many of the tough Heartless in Days, you only fight the Guard Armor once in the game prior to facing its powered up variant, so the Powered Armor is actually a refreshing sight to see. It can also regrow limbs. Nothing incredible, but it could be a lot worse. The Guard Armor Omega is kind of ugly. I guess it does give off the appearance of a more dangerous Guard Armor, but it also gives off the appearance of being bad. The last armors come in a pair: the Sinister Suites, associated with Valentine's Day events, and the Spiteful Suites, associated with White Day events. For those who aren't aware, White Day is a Japanese holiday that occurs 1 month after Valentine's Day, in which men give reciprocating gifts to all the women who gave them chocolates on Valentine's Day. This is referenced in the Spiteful Suite's Japanese name, White Returner, but personally I think the word spiteful provides some fun imagery. However, I'm gonna have to separate these two lovebirds on the tier list. While the Spiteful Suites earns its spot for having a neat design, the Sinister Suites gets an extra boost for being reused as a boss in Candy Kingdom. Now that's some excellent theming. Although I would much rather be spending this time talking about the true boss of KH1 Wonderland, the Bazaar Room Table, the Trickmaster is the one with the journal entry, so here we are. And what exactly is the Trickmaster? I have no idea, but in my opinion, that's what makes this design so strong. Toss in some neat interactable elements with the stove and the torches, subtract a few points for the 3D shooting section in Recoded and one of the most unfortunate Final Mix recolors, and the Trickmaster earns itself a respectable placing in the whole pint tier. The Crimson Prankster is going way down on the list. Its epic prank is wasting your time. It will infinitely revive its partner unless you take them both down within a certain window of each other. Had this been communicated to the player beforehand, I'd be applauding the unique gimmick and only taking off a few points for its completely uninspired design. But alas. It doesn't help that both Crimson Pranksters have way too much HP for their own good, so if you aren't managing their health bars to keep them roughly equal, or say you had no idea you needed to do so because a certain cat gave no indication of the gimmick, then you'll be hitting your head against the proverbial glass for upwards of 10 minutes. The Trickmaster Omega is one of the first Omega variants that I actually like. Now, I don't like it enough to place it anywhere above dead average, but it's got a fun magician vibe and a cute bird. The final two Trickmaster variants are the holiday specials, the Jack in the Box, debuting in Christmas 2014, and the Eggmaster, arriving in Easter the same year. Both of these designs are way too busy for my liking. There's just so much going on, and none of it's particularly pleasing. A failing grade for the both of them. Time for the Stealth Sneak. As the last line of defense until Sora earns the Cure spell in KH1, the Stealth Sneak is something of a roadblock for first-time players. It begins the fight invisible, only appearing after enough damage has been dealt. Although its homing charge beam attack can be quite deadly, I wouldn't consider the Stealth Sneak to be unfair. Plus, this is one of the few Heartless to fight side by side with the Disney boss, and the only one to claim the life of an imbecile. Into the high tier it goes. The Sneak Army is in much the same position as the Red Armor. While it appears in the Hades Cup in all versions of KH1, it is only named in Final Mix. I think the invisibility is an interesting shakeup, so even though it doesn't bring anything new to the table, I'll still give the Sneak Army a low passing grade. Unlike the KH1 members of the family, the Veil Lizard does not start the battles invisible, instead opting to periodically shift in and out of view. Apart from that, its moveset is largely the same as its predecessors. While the Heartless appears in the Mission 89 mini-boss rush, its true claim to fame is absolutely walloping Xion on day 74. For that alone, the Veil Lizard stands out enough to rank above the Sneak Army, but a hefty tongue flick won't top a brutal death by crushing. The last member of this reptilian family is the Lurk Lizard. The Lurk Lizard is native to Wonderland, disguising itself as furniture in the Bazaar Room and hiding in the Tea Party Garden. It's a neat touch, but the gameplay side of things is still largely unchanged from the Stealth Sneak and Veil Lizard. I am obligated to mention that the Lurk Lizard is one of very few Heartless and Kingdom Hearts Magical Puzzle Clash to have thematically appropriate spells in its repertoire, as it parallels its in-game invisibility by exclusively casting the Blind spell. Put it all together, you have a Heartless that's better than average, but ultimately pretty forgettable.
I think that we better get rid of all the Heartless first.
Let's take a quick break from the rankings. It's time for a pop quiz. In how many Disney worlds does the shadow not appear? The answer isn't perfectly straightforward. 6 worlds lie in a gray area, since even though they are shadow-free, the Heartless does appear in alternate versions of the world. This includes Disney Town and Country of the Musketeers with Disney Castle, Symphony of Sorcery with the Mysterious Tower, Prankster's Paradise with Monstro, The Grid with Space Paranoids, and the Caribbean with Port Royal. The worlds that are 100% shadowless in all realities are Atlantica, 100 Acre Wood, Deep Space, La Cité de Cloche, Game Central Station, Candy Kingdom, and Arendelle. So that's 7 worlds that are strictly without shadows in all iterations, and 13 worlds including the edge cases. All according to plan. It's time to get back to the tier list, so let's take a quick look at our current standings, then move on to the rest of the KH1 Heartless. Is what I would have said if this project wasn't quickly spiraling out of control. While I originally wanted to cover all of the original Heartless and their descendants in one video, I've decided to split my KH1 coverage into 2 parts, the latter of which should be releasing soon, hopefully. In part 2, we will take a look at multiple super bosses, an obscure Japan-only Heartless, and the single largest Heartless family in the series, among other things, so stay tuned. I'll leave you here with one final pass through each tier.